Marvel's Spider-Man for the PlayStation 4. The time is finally upon me to look at this game from a critical aspect. To say that my relationship with this game was anything but tumultuous would be understating it a bit. I had little faith in Insomniac games and absolutely no faith specifically in Marvel games due to past stories of their meddling in titles like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and Marvel Infinite. Despite this game being first party and seemingly being given a budget the likes Activision would scoff at, I was still very worried. From the initial gameplay footage and the reveals, it had seemed that Insomniac were taking pages off of the Beanox entries into the Spider-Man games, which as we all know weren't exactly that great, ranging from average to abysmal. I thought the game was doomed. And no, it's not because I didn't trust Insomniac at all to deliver quality. Hell, I even named my cat Hunter because of Spyro and its profound effect on my childhood, which should show you how high my regard is for them. I just don't trust when multiple parties are collaborating on a project because it usually means toes are being stepped on in order to meet a corporate mandate of what the primary party wants the game to look like. In this case, Marvel Games. And it definitely shows a bit sometimes, with a few bits of dialogue not making a lot of sense, and the arbitrary list of villains that seem to make it into every single Spider-Man game known to man. I digress. Gradually over time, I stopped worrying as much, as more and more gameplay was being shown off. The game looked amazing, but looks and feels are two completely different things, and with conflicting reports as to how the game felt, I tuned off, left wanting to make my own impressions of the game. Until I saw, or more realistically was spoiled, seeing the Homecoming suit. I won't lie, this made me really excited, as well as hearing creative director Brian Intihar state that cutscenes in-game were completely in real time, meaning whatever you're wearing is what the scene will show rather than switching to the default advanced suit, which isn't exactly my cup of tea. And I really appreciated that Insomniac took the time to do this to make everyone happy, regardless of your opinions on the big white spider. You can play as your Spider-Man, which is awesome. But oddly enough, what really sold me and won my respect and trust and ultimately my money was something that was so simple but proved to be nothing short of a genius idea. It was photo mode. Photo mode was the nail in the coffin. Why, you might ask? Because it was then and there that all parties involved proved to me that they care about people like me who are book readers, who do read and have knowledge of the source material, who have been reading for years and would love to make their own splash panels or comic book covers in the video game. It's such a simple yet awesome idea that I saw myself immediately spending a ton of hours playing around with it with all different types of suits just because of the endless possibilities. I got excited at the idea of recreating the main story through splash panels, or diving off of buildings to get the iconic swing pose as a cover page, or just taking a photo to spoof Daily Bugle headlines. The game allowed me the freedom to do this, and it was then and there, despite how the game would turn out, that the game won my heart, and I was hooked. And let me just tell you, it was worth it. Marvel's Spider-Man is nothing short than a love letter to the character and a resurgence of the character and property known as Spider-Man. It is, without question, one of the best Spider-Man games ever made. It rivals Ultimate and Spider-Man 2 in terms of quality and fun factor. I was unable to separate myself from my monitors and my PlayStation 4 when I got my hands on the game, which should tell you all that you really need to know. But if this review were that short, you'd probably put me on a stake because you guys like all the in-depth stuff, so I guess we'll start off with story. Without spoiling any major details about the main story, I can wholeheartedly tell you that Insomniac nailed it. You talk about bottom of the ninth, bases loaded, grand slam type of nailing it. They understand Spider-Man, and more importantly, they understand Peter Parker, and the duality that comes with that lifestyle. The effect that it has and the toll that it takes on his relationships. It's constantly being played out throughout the entirety of the story, along with the themes of being greater than what you are, past your faults and mistakes and desires and wants. To be selfless in the face of adversity. The story is an absolute joyride from start to finish, and while as a fan I knew where things would eventually lead up to, I still thoroughly enjoyed the entire ride from start to finish. There are, however, some pacing issues that revolve around the Mary Jane and Miles Morales sections of the game, more specifically MJ than Miles. It does feel like the game kind of takes a detour when it comes to their stuff, and like it's filling more of a quota than adding anything to the real story. But their sections are really slim in comparison, so it's not really something worth complaining about, just something that I noticed. Some people might not be a fan of their sections, but I found it on the harmless side in the grand scheme of things, alongside the Peter Parker science puzzles. Plus it added variety to the gameplay, which is always a good thing. Some of the villains in the game unfortunately also get the shaft, and aren't given as much time.
Get back here, Shocker! Shocker!
But those who do optimize their time to the fullest potential. Mr. Negative, who plays a large role in this story, comes across as a very sympathetic figure who you really don't want to be a bad guy due to an excellent performance by Stephen O'Young. As a matter of fact, I should take this time to really recognize all the actors, from the stunt actors to the main cast. Top to bottom, not one bad performance. Everyone was pitch perfect, including Yuri Lowenthal as his first major foray into the Spider-Man role. I'll be honest, Josh Keaton and Christopher Daniel Barnes are my Spidey, and I was a little peeved when Josh ended up getting saddled with the Electro role. They're who I hear when I pick up a book and read, but Yuri deserves his spot in the top echelon of Spider-Man as well. His performance in this game is immaculate. You feel everything he says and does, and there's impact and weight to his performance, and his chemistry with Laura Bailey, who plays Mary Jane, is off the charts, as well as his chemistry with Miles Morales, played by Najee Jeter. One of everyone's favorite bits in the game is Spider-Cop, which is hilariously carried by Spider-Man and Yuri Watanabe's banter, and the payoff at the end just makes the whole thing come together perfectly.
Lovable, grizzled, seen-too-much detective is in town.
What? No. You promised you wouldn't do that any...
Spider Cop.
Please, no. Still there? Got a robbery a few blocks away.
Spider Cop's on it. Part man, part spider, all cop.
If I had to nitpick one blemish though, it would be Jonah Jameson. Sometimes he's pretty good, and other times you can tell that his natural voice is kind of coming into play, and he's doing more of a Jonah voice than letting it be his own character. The moments where he's getting really fired up is usually where you kind of notice.
Get ready, folks, because this is a bombshell. We have on the line a lady whose husband was kidnapped by Spider-Man.
What? No, you've got it all wrong. My husband was kidnapped by criminals who shoved him into the trunk of a car. Spider-Man found him and got him out, then arrested the criminals when they came back.
Pardon me, ma'am, I didn't hear that last part over my intern's utter incompetence. You realize, of course, that it's possible Spider-Man arranged the kidnapping so he could save your husband and grab all the glory?
That seems like a lot of trouble to go to when he could just stop actual crimes.
It's clear we are at an impasse. My best to you and your husband, madam. Jared, go to commercial, then fire yourself. Then rehire yourself before the commercial ends. But no, your job hangs by a thread. If I paid you, I'd cut your salary in half.
Kinda makes me wish we had J.K. Simmons back as Jonah, but again, it's a nitpick. Anyway, back to the story. This universe seems to pull from a lot of different areas of Spider-Man's past, whether it's directly from the comics, or even some from the films, or some from the cartoon shows, which if you get to the end, you'll understand what I mean. Sometimes it works, and sometimes I'm left scratching my head, but I can't judge too harshly because I'm interested in seeing where things go. I will say though, if you're not a fan of Dan Slott, however, you guys might have a bit of a tough time swallowing some of the story elements, as you can kind of feel his DNA in there a few times. But again, it's nothing that will ruin your overall enjoyment of the entire game. It's safe to say that this is the best Spider-Man story we've seen put to video game of all time, bar none. Gameplay is also very exquisite. Spider-Man is as nimble as he can be, as the concepts behind Insomniac's Sunset Overdrive blend in very well with the Spider-Man template in this game. Holding R2 without jumping enables Spidey to go into a free run mode in which he sprints around everywhere and will contextually proceed to jump over or around all obstacles in his way in order to proceed forward. It's pretty awesome to watch, but as we all know, the real meat and potatoes is undoubtedly the web swinging. It's the most important thing outside of combat in any Spider-Man game, and it can either make or break the game. It's your main mode of transportation, so how did Insomniac fare with theirs? They did pretty okay. Web swinging isn't a one-for-one remastering of Spider-Man 2's momentum-based pendulum physics, but it works well enough on its own that doing it isn't a chore. It also isn't completely easy and skillless like the Amazing Spider-Man swinging. There's a bit of a learning curve to it, and it takes a little while to adjust to how it functions properly, and in two ways from what I've seen. One is gaining speed via consistently swinging and pressing the X button while Spider-Man kicks his legs up in the air at about mid-swing. and the other is to swan dive from higher altitudes, which increases your speed when you first throw out your initial web line. But the most important part about your swinging all depends on where you release the button on your swing, as it determines where it carries you. The earlier, the less altitude, and the later, the more. The most important thing to the team seemed to have been non-stop movement, and nothing impeding your ability to Spider-Man. Overall, the swinging is fun, and it's added by a phenomenal score that accompanies you as you begin to travel and stops when you do, giving your traversal an epic feeling. Add this with web zip jumps, and you can really have some awesome looking moments that look montage worthy. Along the way as you progress through the game, you can also unlock tricks that you can do while you drop from your swings for additional XP. Though unfortunately these are lacking as the tricks are on the handful side, only having 3 with the 4th just being the same as another, just going in the opposite direction. Still, it's nice that Insomniac listened to us contingent of fans that wanted tricks back from Spider-Man 2. I just wish there were more. And that'll probably be my most common complaint with the game, but more on that in a second. As it stands, this game is now 3rd place of all time best swinging in Spider-Man games, with Spider-Man 2 still being in number 1, so it's in good company. The only complaint that I have with Traversal is that it seems like wall crawling was an afterthought. It's hard to really get on walls without having to directly zip onto them, and yet sometimes the collision detection can be whacked out, making Spider-Man unable to crawl over certain obstacles that he clearly should be able to, which made some of the street crimes that wanted me to stealthily take down goons a bit more harder than it had to be. Combat is also extremely fun. At its core, most people will probably unfairly compare this to Arkham, which I can see, but also not see. The combat in this game plays more like Devil May Cry, or at least for me it does. I'm constantly challenging myself to stylize my takedown of goons and mooks alike, and the gadgets provided by Insomniac, inspired by Spidey's more recent interpretation in comics and films, adds an extra layer of depth as to how you can approach it, making it extremely satisfying. Whether it's using a trip mine to snatch up 2 goons at once, or sneaking up on a group and using a web takedown followed by a web bomb that plasters everyone to a wall, the options are endless on how you want to engage the criminals of New York. That being said, not everything is as useful as you would hope it to be. I found that the gadget that I least use and could probably do without is the suspension matrix. But even then, that's just my preference. You guys could probably use it a lot better than I do, I just don't ever really feel like I need it in combat. The real difference from this game and Arkham, however, is that Arkham is centered more around countering enemy attacks, whereas in Spider-Man you don't really counter anything, you mostly just dodge.
We got a dash button!
Dodging is important because as nimble as Spidey can be, he's also pretty fragile. A few hits and you'll be biting the dust in no time. So learn your moves and learn your crowd control techniques as soon as you can because it'll pay off in the long run, trust me. My biggest gripe with combat, however, comes in the form of takedowns, which are executed by pressing triangle and circle together. These moves, while initially awesome, are very limited in their variety, which makes the moves kinda dull by the umpteenth time you've seen them. I wish there were far more than what we got, which again goes to my complaint earlier including the tricks. There's far too limited amounts of animations for combat. I'd be happier with at least 4 or 5 more, especially with the likes of the punch-punch-kick combo and the stop hitting yourself takedowns. More variety of those kind of takedowns would go a long way, as well as implementing a multi-takedown system. I often wonder why it is that Spidey can't dispose of 2 regular mooks at once when he has all the abilities to do so, especially in late game. But I guess this is stuff that can be going out for, future reference, as I'm sure the devs are busy with post-game content. And guess what else? Webbing isn't relegated to being a useless prop. You actually need webbing in this game in order to survive. What a shock! It's almost as useful as the dodge, because both of them get you out of situations more than you would think. I will say, however, I do wish that one change would be implemented into the trip mine. I wish it had an outline before you shot it out to an enemy to determine which way it would face, so you have more of a likely chance to getting 2 people in one shot. It'll make the stealth sections go a lot more smoother knowing where your precision lies. Something I didn't have fun with, however, are the towers that the game kind of nudges you to do at the beginning of the game, and quite frankly, you probably should go out of your way to do them then, because if you don't, it'll be more of a chore later. Here is where I can see the comparisons to Arkham. Very much so. I think they took a little bit too much inspiration with the cryptographic sequencer sections ripped straight out of that game with these Oscorp towers. Their main objective is to provide your suit with the ability to read where objective points are on the map, as well as exposing the certain grid it's attached to. Normally I'd love for things to do in an open world, but this just kinda seems like it was put in to artificially stretch out the game time. Even though it's fun to swing around the city, the ability to not know what's even in it because of it being blacked out by a mini-puzzle is kind of odd, especially for a Spider-Man that's been 8 years into his crime-fighting career. This just doesn't make sense. However, when the map is exposed, you'll find that there is initially a ton of things for you to do, with even more things being gradually added as you progress through the story. You'll have your staples like random crimes around the city, but you'll also have things like base clearing missions, Oscorp research stations, Taskmaster challenges which range from combat missions to stealth to bomb defusals to drone races, as well as additional side missions. There's a ton of stuff for you to do when you first start out. You'll want to do as many of these as you can because you'll earn tokens, and based on each individual task that you complete, you can then in turn redeem these tokens for things such as combat upgrades, or more importantly, the ability to unlock suits. Each suit is locked off via level requirement, and once you reach the experience points for that level, you'll be able to redeem the suit for the tokens that it's worth. And it's usually a portion of 2 or 3 different tokens at once, so make sure you work on all of them rather than just focusing on one. Speaking of experience levels, you also get XP that you can in turn reward for upgrades for 3 separate trees that affect combat as well as your defensive capabilities on top of your mobility as well. Some of these are absolutely crucial in the early game, so look really hard to make your choices count. The good thing is that you're not locked to one tree. You can max all trees out, but spend wisely. Speaking of suits, Insomniac really went out of their way to incorporate a lot of suits from Spider-Man's lore over the years, and there's a ton of depth to each suit, due in part to each suit having a specific mod and suit powers that accompanies it when you purchase a suit. The best part is that they made sure that you're not locked into one suit specifically for those mods or powers. You can mix and match once you've purchased them, which again allows you to play with the suit of your preference without altering your playstyle. This is something so simple yet so overlooked in many games. This is really about letting us be the Spider-Man that we want to be, and I cannot commend the team enough for allowing us to play the way we feel, and it deserves mention. The art team also deserves their accolades as well. This is about as accurate a portrayal of New York that I have ever seen in a video game. They've gone out of their way to nail all of the landmarks, some of which we haven't even seen before, like Radio City and Rockefeller Center. But the thing that I was most impressed with was how much they got the boroughs right of each section of the island. So many times you see a New York in video games that's just kind of filled with nothing but high-rises and duplexes, because that's what people think of when they think of New York, right? It couldn't be farther from the truth. In this game, Harlem looks and feels like Harlem, a very diverse and culturally appropriate area with a lot of expressive street art and music being blasted down the neighborhood. And it differs from, say, a place like Flatiron, which is the complete opposite. As someone who was born and partially raised in the Big Apple, this makes me super happy to see. The character models are also spot on, as well as the environments everywhere throughout the game. The Stark suit looks like a one-for-one recreation, and oftentimes in the in-game cutscenes make you feel like you're actually watching a Spider-Man movie because the model is that damn precise. The attention to detail is immaculate in this game, going just beyond the art. Spider-Man himself has 2 different versions of dialogue recorded, one for when he's calm or perched in an area not really moving around, and another when he's like stressed, either in action or swinging around. It's the little things that add up in this game, and it pays off big time. If no other reviewer brings this up, I at least wanted to, because I see your effort, Insomniac, and I thank you for it. It feels like the team was really thinking of everything they could possibly put into the game to make it look and feel as polished and finished as possible, and the effort in the end product definitely shows. That being said, I still do have a bit of issues with the game. Most of them, however, revolve around the endgame. Unfortunately, once you have maxed everything out that there is to do, and have gotten all the tokens, and have upgraded everything, and have even taken care of those pesky secret photo ops, the endgame is very lacking in content. You can do random crimes to your heart's content, which thankfully is there without there being a cap as to how many you can do before they never appear again, like in other Spider-Man games, but you'll soon discover that doing the same car chase, or store robbery, or mugging crimes, or drug deals quickly becomes tiring after a short while. It's hard when you're seeing the same animations play out consistently to really continue grinding, whether that's the takedowns or disabling vehicles. It all starts to feel the same and it loses its luster rather quickly. I wish there were more variations to the crimes, things like taking out bombs planted in the city, or rushing people in distress to the hospital, or even saving people from burning buildings, or even a police manhunt to maybe something involving more interiors. Something to kind of divide us from not always needing to kick someone in the face. You could always go back to try and beat your scores on the Taskmaster challenges, but once you've gotten everything you need, there isn't much incentive other than bragging rights, as you can't compare scores with your friends online, which seems like a missed opportunity. I'll be honest, sometimes I miss the Bugle and Pizza missions from Spider-Man 2 as they were fun things to do in the endgame, and I think this game could desperately use something along those lines. But I think the biggest sin here is a lack of a New Game Plus mode, which I'm glad the team has at least confirmed to us is coming, although the timetable for it is currently unknown. However, while people wait for that, it could have also been partially alleviated by adding something in as simple as a mission selector, which is also oddly missing once you reach the end of the game. I would have loved to have gone back to earlier missions and seen some of the suits that I unlocked in the later half of the game, but unfortunately the game doesn't allow us to do that just yet. Another small gripe is the lack of a real day-night cycle. We do get the option once the game is completed to switch the game to our preference, but unfortunately that's all we get to do with a very basic set with just a standard day, sunset, night template. Throughout the game there's various amounts of weather effects like smoggy gray rainy skies or even a thunderstorm at one point. We can't access any of those unless we do those specific missions that those weathers are tied to. It's a little jarring when it seems like the team put in a lot of effort into most things in the game. To what your options are, this just seems like it was an afterthought or put in really late into development, which is a shame. Regardless, however, those are all very minor things that are wrong that I personally have noticed, that don't diminish just how good of a time I've had with the game overall. And most of the issues I'm sure are going to be ironed out over time as the game gets further support. This game isn't just a great Spider-Man game, but it's possibly the greatest Spider-Man game. The content, the effort, the supports, the suits, the acting, the story. This game is as complete package as a complete package gets. It gets my highest recommendation and not only cements itself as one of the best Spider-Man games ever made, but one of the best Sony first-party games ever produced. It earns itself a spot right up there with the upper echelon with games like Uncharted and The Last of Us and God of War. It is that damn good. And if you guys are on the fence about it, take my word. Buy it. If you're thinking about getting a PS4 for it, do it. You will absolutely not regret your purchase. This studio deserves your support so that we can continue to get quality like this for this character. I look forward to the future and what's in store for us next time. Insomniac, thank you. As a fan, I thank you for giving this character the love that we have for him right back to us. It feels like a game that was made by fans for fans. For delivering as true as a Spider-Man experience as you can get. Cheers to the team, guys. I'm rooting for all of you.